Well, this past week, E3 2023 was officially canceled, and now that we've given it a solid 24 hours to mourn what's basically the death of a long-standing industry event in gaming, once referred to as the Super Bowl of video games, it's kind of time to look forward now, especially for this year, which kind of seems like it's going to be a bit scatterbrained with events probably happening all over the place and some of our expectations that should be in place here going into the summer. As we already know about a couple of events and some that are rumored, I thought we'd sort of go over maybe what we can see as we head through the next couple of months. So if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure you like it and subscribe if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel as we head towards 700,000 subscribers. So let's start with the obvious one here, and that's Microsoft. They have already announced that they will be doing a dual showcase kind of, so they've been very specific to separate the two. They'll have a Microsoft or an Xbox showcase, I assume just going over some general announcements from them, which include something like Forza that sort of needs a release date, and I'm thinking that's going to be one of their big fall or holiday releases. And they have just so many studios that are going to be ready to at least show something of value that it can be anyone's guess at this point. And hey, maybe they'll even throw in a shadow drop, sort of like what they did with Hi-Fi Rush, if something, of course, is ready. And, you know, this will be right around the time I figure that the Activision Blizzard acquisition will have wrapped up or about to wrap up again in June. So I don't think they're going to be part of the showcase, but that'll be in the headlines, be big news, and it'll be kind of all eyes on Microsoft there. And then directly after that, they're just going to flow right into what's supposed to be a sizable Starfield showcase. All of this happening June 11th, which is typically when they would be going anyway, in sort of their own convention center, their own hall to showcase this kind of stuff on stage. And it's interesting because this is Sunday, and it almost feels like it could be working to kick off that week. We're still waiting to hear from, I think, other publishers and developers, but I noticed that from that, we now know that Ubisoft Forward will be happening the very next day. So June 11th is Microsoft along with Bethesda and Starfield, and then Ubisoft the next day. So you see what I mean? Where it's almost like maybe some of these publishers, developers will kind of hone in on just doing streams during that week, but we'll have to see. But for Ubisoft, I do expect a lot of Assassin's Creed. That's the biggest thing they can hang their hat on right now, is Assassin's Creed has actually become more and more popular, whereas some of their other franchises, I'm looking at you, Ghost Recon, has completely fallen on its face. So that's the biggest thing. I think they're going to spend a sizable amount of time on Assassin's Creed. Prince of Persia Remake is still a ways off, it seems, after they nearly had to reboot the thing and had to come back and tell us that it's not canceled. That's not exactly a great announcement when you have to just make saying, hey, this game, we didn't scrap it. It's still happening. And then Splinter Cell Remake is still early on, I think, in development, as the big announcement for it was mostly that they were working to recruit developers for the project. Hey, you could throw a Just Dance in there, maybe. Well, and maybe a Battle Royale game. You can always count on those with Ubisoft. I'm hoping Ubisoft can genuinely surprise me with some interesting stuff here and not just show off Skull and Bones again. Now, before all of that, Sony should, because it's rumored right now, have a showcase. Now, this is something that could find its way into June, but I think everything is setting up for them to have this larger presentation in May, right? And that's kind of what the talk has been for a little while now, and Sony should have a lot to show because the last showcase that they had was September 2021 definitely, but it was like towards the end of that. So it's been, by the time this will go off, more than 1.5 years of just kind of hanging out, waiting for them to do a sizable showcase, not like a smaller state of play where they pull from more of their partners or third-party developers, like just straight up, okay, you show up with your big first-party talent and show us what you got. Remember the last one, we had like Spider-Man and Wolverine, God of War Ragnarok. There was a lot going on there. But now you got to turn to their multiplayer sector, because that kind of feels like what's going to really headline stuff here with the Factions multiplayer, that live service game. I assume they would be ready to showcase that. It feels like they've shown us concept art almost every time. Now is a good time really to get things rolling with that, since Last of Us Part 1 is out and done and breaking on PC. Horizon multiplayer, that's another one that's leaked out early, and we figure that would probably be showcased here from Guerrilla. Then you kind of look towards some of their second-party deals. Well, not second-party now with Haven Studios after they decided to purchase them. I assume something with them will at least be showcased very early on, yes, but at least give us an idea as to what's going on over there. There's been a lot of talk about cloud integration and stuff, and then Deviation Games is apparently creating a more competitive or maybe military style first-person shooter, and I think that's something that would work really well with their current offerings being more narrative, single-player-driven, third-person action-adventure titles. A game that might lean more into the days of Killzone or Resistance would be very welcome, I think, for PlayStation's lineup. And then you look towards studios that have had a couple of years now restarting the cycle and working through some projects, I assume, like Sucker Punch and Bluepoint. Again, just to even give us a glimpse as to what they are currently working on. Bluepoint originally, I thought they were going to do a remake, but then the more we heard about what their plans were, the more it sounds like it's going to be a new intellectual property, but that's, again, they'll have to let us know. And then Sucker Punch is Ghost of Tsushima 2 is the safe bet, but that's a safe bet. I kind of feel like Ghost of Tsushima, as it is now, can stand on its own, especially with some of the expansion or DLC they did. And I wouldn't mind seeing what else Sucker Punch can do rather than feel like they're kind of confined to that intellectual property with a sequel. As for the PSVR 2, it needs a boost, especially with recent reports. So I'm hoping we get something that feels like a must-have exclusive for this headset, or at the very least, get Valve to move Half-Life Alyx over. Just something that can make a splash with the PSVR 2. And then there's also potential for Sony to announce hardware revision, specifically a slim PlayStation 5, as that has been rumored with the detachable disk drive for what feels like half a year now. And I would certainly expect them to maybe even close out the show with Spider-Man 2, a new look at the gameplay, maybe whatever twists they have to differentiate it from the first one. And, of course, give us a release date since it's lining up to be their big holiday title. And that brings us to the last platform holder who is certainly going to be a wild card, I feel like, this summer, and that's Nintendo. Mostly because the timing is kind of weird for them, so I sort of get why they looked at E3 and they're like, that is kind of a rough situation for us because we won't necessarily have as much to showcase to make a big general direct out of it, one that's more on the level of what they would have for E3. Considering we are in the 7th year of the system, you kind of think, okay, they are looking towards that next generation device, and software development certainly would have had to have moved there by now, with Tears of the Kingdom being their last hurrah for the current Switch platform. I know Metroid Prime 4 is still on the horizon, but let's face it, Zelda significantly higher in terms of its reachability, I guess you could say, or its marketability and what it's proven in the past, especially with Breath of the Wild doing a significant sales boost over some of the previous Zelda games. So you think, okay, well, what else could they show then, and how would they handle this time period? Well, Pikmin 4, that is coming up in July. Again, not on this level, obviously, as a Zelda, but still a release there that fans have been waiting for. And with Zelda just coming out in May, they could talk about expansion pack for it or some kind of DLC, as they have done with a lot of their releases recently. But otherwise, the belief is we may see Nintendo more or less lean on remasters and maybe smaller experiences to kind of get them to that next generation device. So F-Zero GX, that's been rumored quite a bit. I think that'd be a lot of fun to have that come back with online multiplayer. The Zelda Wind Waker Twilight Princess bundle has been rumored forever. The last we heard is that it's just sitting around, and a lot of evidence has continued to pile up, by the way, that Nintendo does this a lot, especially recently with some of their titles, where they'll just have them hang out for a year or more until it's strategically ready to be released. That's the only explanation I can give for why some of these games sit around for as long as they do. A 2D Mario game, I think that would make sense as well. A follow-up to the new Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe. And they couldn't maybe they take the U out this time. I don't know, we'll see. And then Donkey Kong, that has been rumored for a little while. Kind of a 2D, 3D hybrid. The rumors around that have been all over the place, specifically for the scope and the idea, but I do believe, yes, there is a new DK game in development right now, and it could be preparing even to be shown in a couple of months. Otherwise, Metroid Prime 4 seems like a good closeout you would expect for E3, but that's if they want to do a big E3 showcase. Is it possible that in June, Nintendo decides to go the way of a partner showcase where they lean on third parties, indies, and such, like they have done with some of these presentations, and then hold things until they're ready to have a larger direct towards the end of this year, maybe in September or October, that would start to maybe set up their next generation release, potentially first half of 2024. It will be interesting if Nintendo decides to go all the way until the end of 2024 before they're prepared to launch their next hardware, because that feels like it's as a long generation for a system that is definitely struggling when it comes to the hardware, since it's a Tegra X1 from, 2015. Oh, and I also wanted to throw Devolver Digital in there. That they genuinely have some pretty unique titles to announce, and their Devolver Direct is typically them just kind of making fun of the industry with satire, and it's at least an entertaining watch. And you know what? I need to see more about Plucky Squire. Specifically, I need a release date, and hopefully it's earlier in the second half of 2023 than later, because that game looks pretty good. And then the main event, the one that it seems like it's being hyped up pretty heavily now, and in fact, it's also kind of dancing on the grave of E3, especially since their most recent press release that they sent out to everyone's inbox said that Summer Games Fest is indeed not canceled. So they've Jeff Keighley is probably having a blast right now with everything that's going on with E3, feeling like he's on top of the world and unstoppable right now, as he is kind of taking over the gaming industry when it comes to these larger industry events. Think about it. He runs the Game Awards. He basically runs Gamescom now, right, with that entire event. And now he's kind of taken over E3's spot. But Summer Games Fest is interesting because anything can really be there. I mean, Jeff has enough pull to get the debut of a console with the Xbox Series X, and then Hellblade 2, remember, that debuted alongside of it. So you never know what he can come up with there, what strings he can pull to make his show really stand out. And if you're a publisher or developer who has maybe one or two titles to showcase, this is a good spot to place it. You don't have to worry about setting up an entire event and go through all of that for maybe one good reveal. You can kind of drop it in here with Jeff Keighley, who will hype things up, who will get a lot of eyeballs on your game, and just makes it maybe a bit easier and more streamlined for you. The thing I would like to see from Jeff in Summer Games Fest, however, is legitimate innovation on the side of delivering information and showcasing games. Like, for example, maybe something more on the side of a virtual area to explore, whether it's through a web browser or even on the game systems or anything, where you can kind of just check things out right then and there through a series of menus, or even just like a virtual hangout or something. I know it's kind of like, okay, we're getting into the metaverse stuff, but not necessarily for like VR, but more or less creating even an avatar that sticks with the Summer Game Fest and the Game Awards. Kind of a little bit of a gamification in there, but it just works to improve engagement and interest overall. But the idea of cloud-based demos is something that I've thought about quite a bit, and I feel like Jeff has also played around with that idea, but I think if you can just go full on with that, it'd be awesome if they flipped a switch and on your Xbox, your Switch, your PlayStation, your PC, even your phone, you just have an entire section pop up for a limited amount of time. And there's just all these demos that are all streamed through the cloud. And I think it's something that developers and publishers will be more interested in, because we see what happens when demos just go out and you download and play them locally. A lot of data mining happens, and when data mining takes place, a lot of secrets are uncovered and all kinds of code and different things, and at times, we've seen it, the entire game can be unlocked. So it's a sticky situation there, but I feel like there's more control with the cloud, and maybe instead of going to E3 and waiting in line for hours, you can just have that experience beamed to you. Yes, with latency. Yes, with lower picture quality. But it's, again, better than nothing for something that's more of a promotional experience overall. And hey, maybe you can play Metroid Prime 4 earlier. Maybe you can play Wolverine earlier. You kind of get what I'm saying here. Starfield could be available for an hour. You have an hour to walk around Starfield, which means you're not going to get very far, but you would get the experience at least. Otherwise, at this point, though, we're just waiting to hear plans from all these other publishers, Sega, Square Enix, Capcom, EA. I mean, the list goes on and on and on here because we don't have that E3 necessarily to organize it all together for us. It's kind of up to them if they even want to do an event in the first place, or maybe they just want to pile into Summer Game Fest, or who knows? Sometimes it's not a bad idea, though, for them to skip, because we have seen these presentations happen and everyone's kind of like, what was that? Why did we even show up for this? So, hey, you know what? In this case, they won't feel pressure to be at an E3, and they can kind of just take things as they want with their schedule in mind. But it's going to be a interesting year, especially over the summer with games. We could have an entire run from May to the end of July of just game events happening every week. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just easier to schedule and pay attention for that 1 week sprint of E3. But I don't mind more of a marathon, especially if there's some good games to check out and a lot of fun stuff happening. But let me know what you guys think about all of this down below. How do you think this summer is going to play out with what I would again say is a very scatterbrained and unknown summer of gaming? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.